July 26th, 1944. 5 years into a war that has turned Europe into a charnel house. RAF pilot Albert Wall is flying a Mosquito, the fastest thing the Allies can put in the sky, 400 miles per hour. Untouchable. Then something impossible happens. A shape screams past his canopy. Not past, through, like Wall is standing still, like physics itself has changed sides. He slams the throttle forward. Full power. The Mosquito shudders, straining against the limits of what propellers and pistons can do. 15 minutes. 15 minutes of maximum speed, the engine temperature climbing into the red, and whatever that thing was just keeps pulling away, growing smaller, then gone. This is the moment Allied air superiority died, the moment bomber crews learned the meaning of the word horror, watching fighters move so fast their gunners couldn't track them. The moment formations that had ruled the skies discovered they were suddenly terribly vulnerable. That shape was the Me 262. 540 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour, faster than anything with American markings, armed with 30mm cannons that could tear a flying fortress apart with a single hit. And on March 18th, 1945, just 37 of them faced down 1,221 bombers and 632 fighters, and won. This is the story of the jet that shouldn't have existed. The weapon that could have changed everything. And the 15 minutes when one Allied pilot realized the war had just become something entirely new. Flight Lieutenant Albert Wall doesn't know he's flying into history. Right now, at 11:45 in the morning, somewhere over Bavaria, all he knows is the rhythm of his aircraft. The de Havilland Mosquito. The British call it the Wooden Wonder. A bomber made of plywood and balsa wood when the rest of the world builds aircraft from aluminum and steel. It sounds absurd. Wooden airplanes fighting metal ones, like bringing a bow and arrow to a gunfight. But the Mosquito is no antique. Powered by 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the same engines that power the legendary Spitfire, the Mosquito can reach speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour. At this altitude, in mid-1944, there's nothing in the Allied arsenal that can catch it. Nothing in the German arsenal either. That's the theory, anyway. That's what the intelligence reports say. That's what keeps reconnaissance pilots like Albert Wall alive. When they fly deep into enemy territory with no defensive weapons, no armor plating, nothing but speed and altitude between them and the fighters that hunt them. Wall has flown this mission profile dozens of times. Take off from Fermo airfield in Italy before dawn. Climb to operational altitude. Navigate across the Alps. Photograph enemy positions over Munich. Turn for home. Land before dark. Clinical. Methodical. Professional. He's done it so many times he can almost do it in his sleep. The Mosquito responds to his touch like an extension of his own body. Every vibration, every sound, every subtle shift in the aircraft's behavior is familiar. Behind him sits his navigator, Flight Officer Albert Loban. They've flown together for months. They know each other's rhythms, each other's voices, each other's fears, though neither would ever admit to fear out loud. The mission has gone perfectly. The cameras have captured everything they need: railway yards, supply depots, troop concentrations. Intelligence officers back in Italy will spend days analysing these photographs, planning the next bombing raids, the next offensive push. But Wall and Loban won't see those reports. They'll already be flying the next mission, if they make it home. 29,000 feet above Munich. The air is so cold it would kill an unprotected man in minutes. Wall's breath fogs inside his oxygen mask. His hands, even in thick gloves, ache from the cold, but he keeps them steady on the controls. Below, Bavaria spreads out like a topographic map. Every detail is sharp in the crystalline air. Rivers winding through valleys, roads cutting through forests, towns clustered around crossroads. It's beautiful, in a way. Peaceful from up here. The war seems distant, abstract. Just geography and geometry. Then Lobben's voice crackles through the intercom. 3 words that change everything. Aircraft, 6 o'clock, closing fast. Wall's training takes over. No panic, no hesitation, just procedure. He glances at the instruments. Airspeed, 400 miles per hour. Altitude, 29,000 feet. Engine temperature, normal. Oil pressure, normal. Everything by the book. He reaches for the throttle, pushes it forward. Not all the way. Not yet. Just enough to add another 10, 15 miles per hour. Standard evasive procedure. Whatever's behind them should fall back, should lose ground, should give up the chase. The Mosquito is untouchable up here. Everyone knows that. Except the aircraft behind them doesn't fall back. It gets closer. Wall pushes the throttle to full power. The Merlin engines scream. The wooden airframe shudders. 410 miles per hour. 420. Every ounce of performance the engineers at de Havilland promised when they designed this machine. Lobben twists in his seat, looking back through the clear canopy. Still coming. 400 yards, maybe less. That's impossible. Wall knows every aircraft in the German inventory. The Focke-Wulf 190. Fast at low altitude, lethal in a dogfight. But it can't maintain this speed up here where the air is thin. The Messerschmitt 109. The backbone of the Luftwaffe. Dangerous. Numerous. But not this fast. Not at this altitude. There's nothing in the German arsenal that should be here. Nothing that should be gaining on a Mosquito in full flight. And yet, Wall's mind races through the options. Dive, bank, turn. But at this altitude, violent maneuvers could stall the aircraft, send them tumbling toward the earth. And if whatever's behind them is faster in level flight, it'll be faster in a dive too. So he holds course, holds altitude, keeps the throttle pinned, and waits. Then the aircraft pulls alongside. Not behind, not chasing, alongside. Wall catches a glimpse through the canopy. For a moment, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 5, the 2 aircraft fly in formation. And in that frozen instant, Wall sees something that shouldn't exist. Twin engines, but no propellers. Sleek, shark-like fuselage. Swept wings. A shape he's never seen before. And speed. Effortless, impossible speed. The German pilot is looking at them, making sure they're allied, making sure they're the right target. Wall can see the pilot's head turn, can almost imagine the calculation happening behind that face. Then the German aircraft adjusts position, moves behind them, off-center, starboard side. And Wall realizes what's about to happen. The sound is strange, not the familiar rattle of machine guns that Wall has heard dozens of times, dodged dozens of times. This is different, deeper, heavier, like someone punching holes through sheet metal with a sledgehammer. Thud. Thud. Wall instinctively throws the Mosquito into a hard bank. Right rudder. Stick over. The wooden airframe groans under the stress. G-forces press him into his seat. The horizon spins. Sky becomes earth becomes sky. "We're hit! We're hit!" Loban shouts. Wall's hands fly across the controls. Checking, assessing, looking for damage. The engines are still running. Both of them. No fire, no smoke. Control surfaces responding. But they're not hit. They can't be hit. The sound was wrong. The impact was wrong. "Open the hatch. Prepare to bail out," Wall orders. Loban scrambles for the emergency hatch. His hands work the inside handle. Training, muscle memory, pull, release. Get ready to jump into 30 below zero air and hope the parachute opens before you black out from hypoxia. He pulls the handle. The hatch tears free, not from cannon fire, from the hinges themselves. The explosive decompression at 29,000 feet rips it clean off and sends it tumbling into the void. That's what Wall heard. That's what Loban heard. Not shells tearing through their aircraft. The emergency hatch tearing itself apart. But there's no time to explain. No time to think. Because the jet, that's what it has to be. A jet, there's no other explanation, is still there. Still hunting. Wall pushes the stick forward. The Mosquito dives. A steep, gut-wrenching plunge toward the clouds, 16,000 feet below. The altimeter spins like a broken clock. The airspeed indicator climbs past 450. The wooden frame screams, literally screams. The plywood skin flexing under stress. It was never designed to handle. The glue joints groaning, the balsa wood core compressing. This is how you break an airplane. This is how you kill yourself. But staying level is certain death. 3 minutes, maybe 4. The longest minutes of Albert Wall's life. The jet stays with them, not struggling, not straining, just there, like a shark following wounded prey. Patient, methodical, waiting for the right moment. Wall levels out at 20,000 feet. Banks left. Climbs. Dives again. Anything to throw off the German pilot's aim. The Mosquito's light weight and wooden construction make it nimble, responsive. But speed is the only real defense. Speed that isn't enough anymore. The jet makes another pass. Wall sees it coming, rolls right. The cannon fire misses by feet. Tracers flash past the canopy, bright streaks of light in the thin air. And then, salvation. Clouds. A layer of thick grey cloud at 16,000 feet. Wall aims for it like a drowning man reaching for a life raft. The Mosquito plunges into the grey murk. Moisture streaks across the canopy. Visibility drops to 0. Wall pulls back on the stick, levels out, reduces, throttle, flies blind on instruments alone, and listens. The scream of jet engines fades. The German pilot has broken off. Maybe lost visual contact. Maybe low on fuel. Maybe just decided 2 attempts were enough. Wall doesn't know, doesn't care. He's alive. Loban is alive. The Mosquito is still flying. That's all that matters. He turns south, toward Italy, toward safety. His hands are shaking now, adrenaline draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But his mind won't stop racing. What was that? What in God's name was that thing? 400 miles per hour. The Mosquito was doing 400 miles per hour, and that aircraft closed the distance like Wall was standing still. Not struggling, not straining, just faster. And the way it moved, the way it positioned itself. Deliberate, controlled. This wasn't some experimental prototype having a lucky day. This was operational. This was real. Wall circles cautiously in the cloud layer, waits another few minutes, then breaks clear into blue sky, empty sky. The jet is gone. He points the Mosquito toward the Alps, toward the mountains that separate Bavaria from Italy, toward home. The flight takes 90 minutes. 90 minutes of watching the fuel gauges tick down. 90 minutes of scanning the sky for that unmistakable silhouette. 90 minutes of replaying those 15 minutes over and over in his head. When the runway at Fermo finally appears below them, Wall has never been so relieved to see Italian soil. The Mosquito touches down, rolls to a stop. Wall cuts the engines. In the sudden silence, he and Loban just sit there for a moment. Neither speaks. What is there to say? They climb out. Ground crew swarm the aircraft, checking for damage. They find nothing. No bullet holes. No cannon strikes. Just a missing emergency hatch. Wall explains what happened. The crew looks at him like he's lost his mind. A hatch doesn't just tear itself off. Not unless something hit it. But Wall knows better. He knows what he heard, what he saw, what he survived. The intelligence officers listen carefully when Wall files his report. They've heard rumours, whispers from other crews, bomber pilots reporting strange aircraft, fighters seeing something flash past at impossible speeds. But most of those reports are fragmentary, incomplete, based on glimpses, guesses, fear. Wall's report is different. Wall got a good look. Wall engaged with the aircraft for 15 minutes. Wall survived. And Wall is credible. A veteran reconnaissance pilot with dozens of successful missions. Not prone to exaggeration. Not prone to panic. The intelligence officers take notes, ask questions. Wall describes everything he can remember. The shape of the fuselage, the swept wings, the absence of propellers, the speed. God, the speed. How fast would you estimate it was going? An officer asks. Wall thinks for a moment. 500 miles per hour, maybe more. It wasn't even trying. It was just faster. The officer writes this down, underlines it. 500 miles per hour. That's 100 miles per hour faster than anything the Allies have. 100 miles per hour faster than should be possible with current technology. Unless. Jet propulsion, another officer says quietly. Has to be. The room goes silent. Everyone's heard about jets. Theoretical engines that use compressed air and burning fuel to create thrust. The British have been experimenting with them. So have the Germans. But experimental is different from operational. Prototypes are different from production aircraft hunting Allied reconnaissance planes over Bavaria. If the Germans have operational jet fighters, the first officer says slowly, everything changes. And he's right. Because the entire Allied air strategy is built on speed and altitude. Reconnaissance planes like the Mosquito fly too fast and too high to intercept. Heavy bombers like the B-17 and Lancaster fly in massive formations with fighter escorts, overwhelming German defenses through sheer numbers and firepower. But if the Germans have fighters that can catch a Mosquito, if they have fighters that can climb faster, fly higher, hit harder than anything the Allies can field, the math changes. The tactics change. The war in the air changes. Within hours, Wool's report is transmitted up the chain of command. Within days, it reaches Allied Air Command headquarters. Other reports start coming in. A B-17 gunner who saw something streak past his formation. A P-51 pilot who caught a glimpse of an aircraft with no propellers. Fragments. Pieces of a puzzle. But Wool's encounter is the most detailed, the most credible, and it confirms what Allied intelligence has feared for months. The Germans have jet fighters. They're operational, and they're hunting. The aircraft has a designation now. Me 262, Messerschmitt 262. Allied intelligence has been tracking its development for over a year, piecing together information from captured documents, interrogated prisoners, reconnaissance photographs of German airfields showing unusual aircraft. But intelligence reports are one thing, an actual encounter is something else entirely. Wool's 15 minutes over Munich proved that the Me 262 isn't just a prototype. It's a weapon, a game changer, a glimpse of the future arriving on a battlefield still fighting with the technology of yesterday. To understand why the Me 262 was so revolutionary and why it appeared in July 1944, we need to step back. We need to understand the history, the decisions, the delays, the politics. Because the Me 262 should have appeared 2 years earlier. And if it had, the entire course of the war might have been different. The story begins in 1938, 6 years before Albert Wool's encounter. The German Air Ministry issues a specification for a jet-powered fighter. Not because Germany is losing the war hasn't even started yet, but because German engineers and scientists understand that propeller-driven aircraft have limitations. Physical limitations imposed by the laws of physics. A propeller works by grabbing air and pushing it backward. Simple. Effective. But the faster you go, the less effective it becomes. At high speeds, the tips of the propeller blades approach the speed of sound. They create shock waves, lose efficiency. Eventually, you hit a wall, a speed beyond which propellers simply don't work anymore. In 1938, that wall is somewhere around 450 miles per hour. The best propeller fighters in the world are approaching that limit. Going faster requires something different, something revolutionary. Jet propulsion. The concept is simple. Suck air in the front, compress it, mix it with fuel, ignite it. The expanding gases blast out the back, creating thrust. No propellers, no spinning blades, just raw power. And unlike propellers, jets get more efficient as speed increases. The faster you go, the better they work. Several German companies respond to the Air Ministry's specification, but one design stands out. A proposal from Messerschmitt. A sleek, twin-engine design with the jet engines mounted under the wings. Revolutionary aerodynamics. Swept wings to improve high-speed handling. A design that looks like it belongs in the future. The design team is led by Waldemar Voigt, a brilliant aeronautical engineer. He understands that jet propulsion requires rethinking everything. You can't just bolt jet engines onto an existing airframe. You need to design from scratch. Consider airflow, compressibility effects, high-speed stability. By 1941, Messerschmitt has a prototype, the Me 262 V1. It's beautiful in a predatory way, all curves and angles. It looks fast, sitting still. Test pilot Fritz Wendel takes it up for the first time in April 1941, but it's still using a propeller engine. The jet engines aren't ready yet. The prototype is just testing the airframe. Finally, in July 1942, the Me 262 flies with jet engines for the first time. Test pilot Fritz Wendel pushes the throttle forward. The twin Junkers Jumo 04 engines spool up. The aircraft accelerates. Faster, faster. And then it lifts off. The world's first jet fighter is in the air. It's everything the engineers hoped for. Fast, maneuverable, powerful. During test flights, the Me 262 reaches speeds over 500 miles per hour. It climbs to 30,000 feet in minutes. It outperforms every Allied fighter by such a wide margin that comparison becomes meaningless. This is 1942, 2 years before Albert Wall's encounter. 2 years when the Me 262 could have been in production, could have been defending German cities, could have been shooting down Allied bombers by the hundreds. So what happened? Why did it take 2 years for the Me 262 to reach operational service? The answer is complicated. Part technical, part political, part strategic confusion at the highest levels of the German war machine. First, the technical problems. The Jumo 004 engines are revolutionary, but they're also unreliable. Early versions have a lifespan of just 10 hours before they need major overhaul. 10 hours. For an engine that's supposed to power a frontline fighter. Engineers work frantically to improve durability, but it's slow going. Jet engine technology is new. There are no textbooks, no established best practices. Every problem requires original research. Then there are manufacturing challenges. The Me 262 requires specialized materials, exotic alloys for the jet engines, precise machining for the turbine blades. By 1943, Germany is running short of critical materials. The Allied bombing campaign is disrupting supply chains. Factories are being destroyed. Rail lines are being cut. Getting the materials needed to build Me 262s becomes increasingly difficult. But the biggest delay, the most frustrating, the most historically controversial, comes from Adolf Hitler himself. In May 1943, Hitler sees a demonstration of the Me 262. He's impressed by the speed, the performance, the potential. But he doesn't see a fighter. He sees something else. He asks the engineers a question. Can this aircraft carry bombs? The engineers exchange glances. Technically, yes. The Me 262 could be modified to carry bombs, but that's not what it's designed for. It's a fighter, an interceptor, designed to shoot down Allied bombers. Carrying bombs would reduce its performance, compromise its advantages. But Hitler insists. He's obsessed with retaliation. Allied bombers are pounding German cities. The Luftwaffe is struggling to stop them. Hitler wants a fast bomber, a revenge weapon that can strike back at England. Something that can evade Allied fighters and deliver bombs to British cities. He orders the Me 262 to be developed as a fighter bomber, not a pure fighter. A bomber that happens to fly fast. The engineers are horrified. This is strategic insanity. The Me 262's greatest value is as a bomber-destroyer. With its speed and firepower, 4 30mm cannons, it could tear through Allied bomber formations. It could shoot down dozens of B-17s and Lancasters. It could potentially turn the tide of the air war. But as a bomber, carrying 1,000 pounds of bombs, it's wasting its advantages, compromising its performance, using a racehorse to pull a plough. The engineers try to argue, try to explain, but Hitler won't listen. He's the Führer. His word is law. The Me 262 will be a fighter bomber. That's final. So months are wasted. Modifications are designed. Bomb racks are engineered. Test flights are conducted. All while Allied bomber formations continue to pound Germany. All while the one weapon that could stop them sits on the ground, being converted into something it was never meant to be. It's not until late 1944, after Albert Wall's encounter, after dozens of other Allied pilots report seeing the mysterious jet fighter, that Hitler finally relents. Finally admits that the Me 262 is more valuable as a pure fighter. By then, it's almost too late. Germany is losing the war on every front. The Me 262 arrives as a last-ditch effort. Too little. Too late. But for the pilots who encounter it in the summer and fall of 1944, timing doesn't matter. Politics doesn't matter. All that matters is survival. And survival means understanding what you're up against. Let's talk about what made the Me 262 so devastating. Why it was such a quantum leap over Allied fighters. Why pilots like Albert Wall found themselves helpless against it. Speed is the obvious answer. The Me 262 can reach 540 miles per hour in level flight. That's 100 miles per hour faster than the fastest Allied piston engine fighters. 100 miles per hour faster than should be possible. In practical terms, this means the Me 262 can choose when to engage. It can attack, then accelerate away before Allied fighters can respond. It's like fighting an opponent who can teleport. But speed is just the beginning. The Me 262 also climbs faster. In air combat, altitude is life. The higher you are, the more options you have. You can dive on enemies below. You can see threats coming from farther away. You can dictate the terms of engagement. The Me 262 can climb to 30,000 feet in a fraction of the time it takes an Allied fighter. By the time P-51s or Spitfires reach operational altitude, the Me 262 is already there, waiting, looking down. Then there's firepower. 4 30mm Mk-108 cannons. These aren't machine guns. They're cannons. Each shell weighs over a pound. When a 30mm shell hits an aircraft, it doesn't make a neat hole. It explodes. Tears apart control surfaces. Shreds hydraulic lines. Turns engines into scrap metal. A single, well-placed burst from a Me 262 can destroy a B-17 bomber. 2 seconds of firing time. That's all it takes. Allied gunners on bombers are trained to shoot at fighters. Lead the target. Aim where the fighter will be. But the Me 262 is so fast that traditional gunnery calculations don't work. By the time a gunner pulls the trigger, the Me 262 has already moved past where the gunner aimed. It's like trying to hit a bullet with another bullet. The Me 262's attack profile is terrifying. It approaches from behind and above, hidden in the sun if possible. Diving at over 500 miles per hour. The bomber crews don't see it coming, don't hear it coming. The first warning is often the sound of cannon shells tearing through aluminum. The Me 262 pilot fires a short burst. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then he pulls up and accelerates away. The entire attack takes less than 10 seconds. Before the bomber formation can react, the Me 262 is gone. A mile away, 2 miles. Already turning for another attack run. Allied fighter pilots call it the hit-and-run tactic. But that makes it sound simple. strategic, clinical. The reality is more like being hunted by something from a nightmare, something faster than you, deadlier than you, something that appears without warning and disappears before you can fight back. P-51 Mustang pilots, flying what's considered the best Allied fighter of the war, find themselves completely outmatched. The P-51 is fast, maneuverable, reliable. It's perfect for escorting bombers deep into Germany. Perfect for dogfighting Fodlan-90s and Bf-109s. But against the Me-262, the P-51, pilots might as well be flying biplanes. They can't catch the jet, can't climb with it, can't outrun it. Their only advantage is low-speed maneuverability. If they can force the Me-262 into a turning fight, they have a chance. The Me-262 isn't as nimble at low speeds. Its swept wings and heavy weight make it less responsive in tight turns. But Me-262 pilots know this. They're trained to never get into a turning fight, never slow down, never give the Allied fighters a chance. Attack, accelerate, escape, reset, attack again. It's a new kind of warfare, and Allied pilots have no counter for it. No tactics, no strategies, just luck and hope, and the prayer that the Me-262 pilot makes a mistake. Some do. The Me-262 has limitations, weaknesses. The engines are temperamental. They're vulnerable to sudden throttle changes. Push the throttle too fast, and the engine can flame out. Cut it too quickly, and it might not restart. Me-262 pilots have to be careful. Smooth, deliberate with their throttle inputs. The engines are also fragile. They don't tolerate combat damage well. A few bullet holes in a piston engine? Usually survivable. But jets? The turbine blades spin at thousands of revolutions per minute. One damaged blade can cause catastrophic failure. The entire engine can disintegrate in seconds. And then there's fuel consumption. Jets are thirsty. The Me-262 has a combat range of only about 90 minutes. Compare that to a P-51, which can fly for 4 hours or more. The Me-262 can't loiter, can't wait for the perfect opportunity. It has to find targets quickly, attack, and head home before the fuel runs out. Allied intelligence learns these weaknesses, studies them, develops counter-tactics. If they can't catch the Me-262 in the air, they'll catch it on the ground, when it's taking off or landing, when it's slow and vulnerable, when the jet engines are spooling up or winding down and can't provide maximum thrust. Fighter squadrons start patrolling Me-262 bases, waiting, watching. When a Me-262 attempts to take off or land, Allied fighters pounce. It's dangerous. German anti-aircraft defences around jet bases are heavy, but it's effective. More Me-262s are destroyed on the ground, or during takeoff and landing, than in air-to-air combat. Still, for bomber crews flying deep into Germany in late 1944, the sight of an Me-262 is terrifying. They know what it means, know what's coming. Some crews report seeing Me-262s and immediately breaking formation, taking evasive action, diving for cloud cover, anything to avoid becoming a target. The psychological impact is enormous. It's one thing to be shot at by conventional fighters. Scary, yes, but understandable. You can fight back. You can maneuver. You can survive through skill and luck. But the Me-262, there's no fighting back. No maneuvering. Just hoping the jet pilot picks someone else. Hoping you're not the target. It's helplessness. And helplessness is corrosive. It destroys morale. Makes crews question whether they'll survive the next mission. Allied commanders take the threat seriously, very seriously. Intelligence estimates that if Germany can produce Me-262s in large numbers, hundreds of aircraft, they could potentially halt the daylight bombing campaign. Force the Allies to switch to night raids only. Buy Germany time to develop other weapons, other defences. The question becomes, how many Me-262s does Germany have? How many can they produce? How quickly can they deploy them? The answers are complicated, frustrating, contradictory. Because Germany in 1944 is a nation in chaos. The economic system is collapsing. The infrastructure is crumbling. The government is divided by infighting and competing priorities. And into this chaos, the Me-262 program must navigate. Messerschmitt is ready to produce hundreds of Me-262s per month. The factories are prepared. The workforce is trained. The supply chains are, barely, functional. But production requires resources. Steel, aluminum, exotic alloys for the jet engines, fuel, lubricants, hundreds of components from dozens of suppliers. And those resources are increasingly scarce. Allied bombing has destroyed ball-bearing factories, disrupted rail networks, cratered roads. Oil refineries are running at reduced capacity. Aluminum smelters are offline. Every Me-262 that gets built requires heroic efforts from logistics officers who are juggling 1,000 competing priorities. Then there's the pilot shortage. Flying in Me-262 requires extensive training. It's not like transitioning from a Bf-109 to a FW-190, both piston engine fighters with similar handling characteristics. The Me-262 is completely different. It accelerates differently, handles differently at high speed, requires different combat tactics. A pilot needs dozens of hours of training before they're combat ready, but Germany doesn't have dozens of hours, or the fuel for training flights, or the experienced instructor pilots to teach the new generation. By 1944, the Luftwaffe is bleeding experienced pilots faster than they can be replaced. Every day, veteran pilots are shot down, killed, captured. The pilots replacing them are younger, less experienced, less prepared. Some Me-262 pilots have only 10 hours of jet experience before they're sent into combat. 10 hours to learn a completely new type of aircraft, to master techniques that didn't exist a year ago. It's like asking someone who learned to drive last week to compete in Formula One. The result is predictable. Many Me-262s are lost to accidents, pilot error, engine failures caused by improper handling. For every Me-262 shot down in combat, 2 or 3 are lost to non-combat causes. It's a waste, a tragedy. But it's the reality of trying to field revolutionary technology in the middle of a losing war. Despite everything, the resource shortages, the pilot training issues, the Allied bombing, the political interference, Germany manages to produce over 1,400 Me-262s by the end of the war. 1,400 aircraft that represent the future of aerial combat. 1,400 jets that, in different circumstances, could have changed the course of the war. But they don't. Because 1,400 isn't enough. Not when you're fighting on multiple fronts. Not when Allied bomber formations include hundreds of aircraft. Not when you're running out of fuel and pilots and time. At peak operational strength, the Luftwaffe has maybe 200 Me-262s available for combat. 200 aircraft, trying to defend an entire nation against thousands of Allied bombers and fighters. It's David versus Goliath. Except David has a jet engine and 4 cannons instead of a sling. The Me 262 units do inflict damage. Significant damage. Records show that Me 262 pilots claim over 700 Allied aircraft destroyed. Some historians think the real number is lower. Combat claims are always inflated. But even if we cut that number in half, it's still devastating. 350 Allied aircraft, 3,500 crew members, thousands of family members back home receiving telegrams, all lost to an aircraft that shouldn't exist yet, to technology that's a decade ahead of its time. The Me 262 pilots fight with skill and courage. They develop tactics, share knowledge, create an institutional expertise in jet combat that won't be matched until the Korean War 6 years later. But expertise isn't enough. Courage isn't enough. By early 1945, Germany is losing on every front. Soviet armies are pushing from the east. Allied armies are crossing the Rhine in the west. German cities are burning. The infrastructure that supports the Me 262 program is collapsing. Airfields are bombed. Runways are cratered. Me 262s sit idle because there's no fuel, or no ammunition, or no spare parts for repairs. Pilots are reassigned to defend cities, or sent to fight on the ground as infantry because the Luftwaffe has more pilots than aircraft. The last Me 262s fly combat missions in April 1945, defending Berlin against Soviet bombers, attacking Allied ground forces near Munich. Desperate, futile missions flown by pilots who know the war is lost but fight anyway because that's what pilots do. And then it's over. Germany surrenders. The Me 262 production lines stop. The jets that are still flyable are captured by advancing Allied troops. Engineers swarm over them, documenting every detail. Taking measurements. Photographing components. Shipping examples back to England and America for detailed analysis. Because everyone understands what the Me 262 represents. It's not just an advanced aircraft. It's a roadmap. A template for the next generation of fighters. The Allies have their own jet programs, the British Gloster Meteor, the American P-80 Shooting Star, but neither is as advanced as the Me 262. Neither has seen significant combat. Neither has been refined through the brutal testing ground of actual warfare. The Me 262 has. And the lessons learned from studying it will shape jet fighter design for decades. The swept wings, the engine placement, the aerodynamic refinements, all of it gets incorporated into post-war aircraft. The F-86 Sabre that dominates the skies over Korea 7 years later, its DNA includes Me 262 genes. So what happened to Albert Wall, the man who started this story? The pilot who encountered the Me 262 on July 26, 1944, and lived to tell about it? Wall continues flying reconnaissance missions, dozens more flights over occupied Europe, photographing enemy positions, mapping defences, providing the intelligence that feeds Allied battle plans. He never encounters another Me 262. Maybe that's luck. Maybe the odds just never line up again. But he never stops watching the sky behind him. Never stops listening for that distinctive scream of jet engines. He survives the war, returns to England, tries to process what he experienced, what he survived. 15 minutes that felt like hours. 15 minutes when the future arrived early and tried to kill him. In the years after the war, Wall gives interviews, talks to aviation historians, describes the encounter in careful detail. He's matter-of-fact about it, clinical, unemotional. That's the British way. Understatement, composure. Never let them see you sweat. But people who know him say he's different after the war. Quieter, more contemplative. Like he's seen something that changed his understanding of the world, of progress, of how quickly yesterday's certainties can become tomorrow's obsolete assumptions. Because that's what the Me 262 represented, ultimately. Not just a faster airplane, not just better technology, but proof that the future arrives whether you're ready for it or not. That the rules can change in an instant. That survival sometimes depends on luck more than skill. Wall keeps the story mostly private, doesn't talk about it at family dinners or neighborhood gatherings. It's not modesty. It's something else. Maybe the understanding that some experiences are too large to fit into casual conversation, too complex to reduce to anecdotes. His navigator, Albert Lobban, is the same way. They stay in touch after the war, meet occasionally, share a drink, talk about everything except that day over Munich. Not because it's traumatic, though it was, but because they both understand that talking won't change anything, won't make sense of it, won't answer the questions that still linger. Questions like, what if Hitler hadn't insisted on the fighter-bomber conversion? What if the Me 262 had entered service in 1942 instead of 1944? What if Germany had been able to produce 5,000 jets instead of 1,400? These questions haunt historians, generate endless debate, entire books arguing counterfactuals. But Wall doesn't engage with them. Can't, really. Because he knows something the historians don't. He knows what it feels like to push your aircraft to its absolute limit and watch something else pull ahead effortlessly. He knows the gut-level understanding that comes from being outmatched by 100 miles per hour. And he knows that technology alone doesn't win wars. The Me 262 was the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world in 1944, by a huge margin, but Germany still lost. Lost because wars are won by logistics and strategy, and industrial capacity and trained personnel, and 1,000 other factors that matter more than any single weapon. The Me 262 was revolutionary, but revolution without resources is just expensive failure. Let's talk about the other pilot, the man flying the Me 262 that day over Munich. His name is probably lost to history. German records from late 1944 are incomplete. Many were destroyed in the final chaotic months of the war. We don't know which unit he belonged to. Don't know if he survived the war. Don't know if he ever learned that his target that day, the Mosquito he chased for 15 minutes, became one of the most well-documented encounters with an Me 262. But we can imagine his perspective, because we know how Me 262 pilots were trained, know what they experienced, know the pressures they operated under. Picture this. You're a Luftwaffe fighter pilot in July 1944. You've been flying Bf-109s or FW-190s for the past year. You've survived longer than most, shot down a few Allied aircraft, dodged more bullets than you can count, watched friends die, watched the Luftwaffe shrink from a dominant air force to a desperate defensive force barely holding on. Then you're selected for the Me 262 program. It's supposed to be an honor, a recognition of your skill. You're one of the elite pilots trusted with Germany's most advanced weapon. But it's also terrifying, because jet aircraft are new. Strange. They don't behave like anything you've flown before. The training is rushed. a few lectures on engine management, a handful of practice flights, warnings about the dangers. Don't advance the throttle too quickly. Don't cut it too suddenly. Watch your fuel consumption. Be careful during takeoff and landing. The Me 262 is fast but fragile, powerful but unforgiving. Then you're declared combat ready, assigned to a unit, sent to defend Germany against the endless waves of Allied bombers that darken the skies every day. Your first combat mission in an Me 262 is surreal. You take off. The acceleration is unlike anything you've experienced. The piston engine fighters you're used to build speed gradually. The Me 262 just goes, pushes you back in your seat with G-forces. The runway falls away and suddenly you're climbing at angles that shouldn't be possible. You reach altitude in minutes. Watch the ground shrink below you, and you feel something you haven't felt in months, maybe years. Confidence. Because up here, at 30,000 feet, flying at 500 miles per hour, you're untouchable. Nothing the Allies have can catch you. For the first time since the Americans started bombing Germany around the clock, you're not the underdog, you're the predator. Then you see your target, a lone aircraft, high altitude, fast, but not fast enough. You push the throttle forward. The Me 262 responds instantly. The distance closes, 4,000 yards, 3,000, 2,000. The target is a Mosquito. You know this type. Fast, maneuverable, dangerous in the right hands. But those hands can't save the crew now. You're faster. You pull alongside, take a good look, confirm it's Allied. See the RAF roundels. See the pilot's face through the canopy for a moment. Just a moment. You almost feel sorry for them. Then training takes over. You position yourself behind and to the side. Off-center. Never directly astern where their tail might have a gun. You check your gun sight. Adjust for speed and distance. Your finger moves to the trigger. But something goes wrong. Maybe your approach angle is off. Maybe the Mosquito pilot sees you and reacts faster than expected. Maybe you're still learning the timing. The first burst misses. The Mosquito banks hard. You follow. But following at 500 miles per hour requires different calculations than at 300. Different timing. Different instincts you haven't fully developed yet. You make a second pass. Fire again. Think you might have hit something. But the Mosquito is diving now, plunging toward the clouds. You follow. The jet accelerates in the dive. 600 miles per hour. The airframe shudders. This is faster than anything should go. Faster than the engineers said was safe. But you keep the pressure on. Keep chasing. The Mosquito reaches the clouds, disappears into grey murk. You have a choice. Follow blind, or break off. You check your fuel gauge. You've been in combat for 10 minutes. Maybe 12. You've burned through a third of your fuel. The base is 90 miles away. If you keep chasing, if you don't find the target in the next few minutes, you might not make it home. You pull up, break off the attack, circle above the clouds, wait to see if the Mosquito emerges. It doesn't. After another minute, you turn for home, disappointed, frustrated, but alive. You land, file your combat report, claim a probable kill. Maybe you hit them. Maybe they went down in the clouds. Maybe you'll never know. But you did your job, engaged an enemy reconnaissance aircraft, forced them to break off their mission. That's a win, even if it doesn't feel like one. And tomorrow you'll fly again. Chase another target. Maybe this time you'll get it right. Maybe this time the timing will work. Maybe this time you'll add another kill to your tally. Or maybe tomorrow Allied fighters will be waiting near your base, watching for your takeoff, ready to pounce when you're slow and vulnerable and the jet engines haven't spooled up to full power yet. Maybe tomorrow you'll be the one who doesn't make it home. That's the reality of flying the Me 262 in late 1944. You have the best aircraft in the sky, but you're outnumbered, out-resourced, fighting a losing war with a weapon that arrived too late to matter. The impact of the Me 262 extends far beyond the handful of encounters like walls. It changes everything about how military planners think about air warfare, about technology, about the pace of innovation. Before the Me 262, air forces assumed that aircraft development followed a predictable curve. Each generation was incrementally better than the last, slightly faster, slightly more capable. You could plan 5 years ahead with reasonable confidence that your enemies wouldn't have anything dramatically superior. The Me 262 destroys that assumption. It proves that technology can make quantum leaps, that a sufficiently advanced weapon can render entire fleets of conventional aircraft obsolete overnight. This understanding shapes Cold War military thinking, drives the frantic race to develop better jets, faster jets, more lethal jets. Within 5 years of the war's end, every major air force is transitioning to jets. The piston engine fighter becomes obsolete, not gradually, not through incremental replacement, but suddenly, decisively. By 1950, propeller-driven fighters are museum pieces. Training aircraft, historical curiosities. The Me 262 also influences aircraft design philosophy. Engineers study its swept wings, its engine placement, its aerodynamic solutions to high-speed flight. These lessons feed into the next generation of jets. The American F-86 Sabre, the Soviet MiG-15, the British Hawker Hunter, all of them incorporate ideas pioneered by the Me 262. In Korea, 6 years after World War II ends, American and Soviet jets clash in the world's first jet versus jet combat. The F-86 versus the MiG-15. Both aircraft trace their lineage back to German jet research. Both incorporate swept wings. Both are designed for high-speed combat. Both exist because the Me 262 proved that jets were the future. The pilots flying these jets understand their heritage. Many of them are World War II veterans. They flew P-51s or Spitfires or Bf-109s. They remember when jets were experimental, theoretical, dangerous. Now they're routine, expected, the standard. But that transition didn't happen smoothly. It cost lives, resources, years of trial and error. Early jets are dangerous. Engine failures are common. Accidents are frequent. Pilots die in crashes that have nothing to do with combat. Just the inherent risks of flying technology that's still being perfected. The Me 262's troubled engine reliability. That's not unique. Early American jets have similar problems. The British struggle with engine fires. The Soviets deal with catastrophic turbine failures. Everyone is learning the same lessons, making the same mistakes, paying the same price in pilots' lives. But gradually, Through iteration and engineering and hard-won experience, jets become reliable, safe enough for routine operations. By the mid-1950s, jet fighters are no longer experimental. They're proven, mature, ready for mass production. And it all started with the Me 262, the first operational jet fighter. The aircraft that arrived too late to save Germany, but early enough to shape the future of aerial warfare for decades to come. There's a broader lesson here, one that extends beyond aviation, beyond warfare. It's about timing, about how technology intersects with historical moment, about how even revolutionary innovations can fail if they arrive at the wrong time. The Me 262 was the right aircraft, built by the wrong nation, at the wrong point in the war. Everything about its design was brilliant. Everything about its deployment was tragic. If Germany had fielded the Me 262 in 1942, when the Luftwaffe still had experienced pilots, adequate fuel supplies, and functioning infrastructure, the impact could have been enormous. Allied bombing campaigns might have been halted, forced to switch strategies. The air war over Europe could have dragged on for additional years. But in 1944, with Germany collapsing, with resources dwindling, with pilot training programs barely functional, the Me 262 was too little, too late, a masterpiece arriving at a disaster. A symphony performed while the concert hall burns down around the orchestra. This pattern repeats throughout history. Revolutionary technology arriving at the wrong moment. The French developed excellent tanks in the 1930s, but they used them incorrectly in 1940 and lost anyway. The British had radar before World War II started, but they nearly lost the Battle of Britain despite this advantage. Technology matters, but context matters more. The Me 262's story is ultimately tragic. Tragic for the German engineers who spent years developing it. Tragic for the pilots who flew it, knowing they were fighting a lost cause. Tragic for the Allied airmen who died facing it. Tragic for everyone touched by a weapon that represented both human ingenuity and human folly in equal measure. But tragedy doesn't mean meaninglessness. The Me 262 meant something. It proved that jet propulsion was viable, practical, deadly. It forced the Allies to accelerate their own jet programs. It changed assumptions about aerial combat. It ended the propeller era and began the jet age. Every jet fighter that flies today, every F-35, every Eurofighter Typhoon, every Su-57 exists because the Me 262 proved it was possible. Proved that aircraft could fly at speeds that would have seemed impossible just years earlier. Proved that the future of warfare would be fought at velocities that tested the limits of human reaction time. Albert Wall lived until 1994, 50 years after his encounter with the Me 262. 5 decades to watch jets evolve from experimental weapons to routine tools, to watch aircraft break the sound barrier, to watch jet airliners carry millions of passengers safely across oceans, to watch the technology that nearly killed him become ordinary, expected, safe. Did he ever ride in a jet airliner? Probably. Did he feel a moment of recognition when the engines spooled up for takeoff? When the aircraft accelerated down the runway and lifted off? When he felt that characteristic push of jet propulsion? We don't know. He didn't talk about it publicly, but we can imagine. Can picture an elderly man settling into an airline seat, feeling the engines start, remembering for just a moment a different engine sound, a different kind of flight. A day when jets were weapons, not transportation, when they represented death, not convenience. Did he think about the German pilot who chased him? The man whose name he never knew? The enemy who became a footnote in his story? Maybe. Maybe he wondered if that pilot survived the war, made it home, grew old like Wall did, found peace. Or maybe Wall didn't think about it at all. Maybe he compartmentalized that day, filed it away in whatever mental space pilots use to store memories of close calls and near-death experiences. Maybe he focused on the thousands of other days in his life, the normal days, the boring days, the days when nothing tried to kill him. But historians remember. Aviation enthusiasts remember. Every time someone tells the story of the Me 262, Wall's encounter is there, one of the best documented, most detailed accounts of what it was like to face the future and survive. Because that's what Wall did, ultimately. He survived. Not through superior technology or tactics or training. He survived through a combination of skill, luck, and the limitations of the weapon hunting him. The Me 262 pilot made 2 attack runs, missed both times, ran low on fuel, broke off. Those are the margins that separate survival from death. Seconds, feet, ounces of fuel. Wall lived another 50 years, raised a family, pursued a career, grew old, died peacefully in his bed, unlike so many of his fellow pilots who died in flames over Europe. That's not heroism. That's just luck. But sometimes luck is enough. Let's return to the bigger picture. The strategic situation in July 1944, when Wall's encounter occurred. Because individual stories, no matter how dramatic, exist within larger contexts. And the larger context of summer 1944 was a world in transition. D-Day had occurred 6 weeks earlier. Allied forces were establishing themselves in Normandy, pushing inland, building up forces for the breakout that would liberate France. In the east, the Soviet summer offensive, Operation Bagration, was destroying German Army Group Center. Entire armies were being encircled, captured, annihilated. Germany was losing on every front. Everyone knew it. German generals knew it. Allied commanders knew it. Even ordinary soldiers on both sides could read the writing on the wall. The question wasn't whether Germany would lose. The question was when, and how many more people would die before the inevitable conclusion. Into this context, the Me 262 appeared like a ghost from an alternate timeline. A weapon that belonged to a different war. A war where Germany had time and resources and strategic clarity. But in the real war, the actual war being fought in summer 1944, the Me 262 was an anachronism. An obsolete weapon from a future that would never arrive. Allied intelligence officers understood this. They tracked Me 262 sightings carefully, estimated production numbers, calculated potential impact, and concluded that yes, the Me 262 was dangerous. Yes, it represented a significant threat. But no, it wouldn't change the outcome of the war. There simply weren't enough of them. Wouldn't be enough of them. Germany's industrial capacity was collapsing. The bombing campaign was working. Not perfectly. It never worked perfectly. But cumulatively. Persistently. Every factory destroyed reduced production. Every rail line cut disrupted logistics. Every synthetic fuel plant bombed, reduced the gasoline available for training flights and combat operations. The Me 262 needed all of those things, factories to build it, rails to transport components, fuel to fly it, pilots to fly it, mechanics to maintain it, air bases to operate from, a functioning military infrastructure to support operations. By late 1944, that infrastructure was dying, not dead yet, but dying. And the Me-262 couldn't reverse that decline, couldn't stop the Soviet advance, couldn't prevent Allied armies from crossing the Rhine, couldn't protect German cities from continued bombing. It could kill. It did kill. 700 Allied aircraft destroyed, according to German records. But 700 losses across 6 months of operations wasn't enough to matter strategically. The Allies were producing thousands of aircraft per month. Losing 700, while tragic for the crews involved, was sustainable, acceptable, within the margins of expected attrition. So the war continued. The Me-262s flew. Allied bombers kept coming. Cities kept burning. Armies kept advancing. And slowly, inevitably, Germany's capacity to resist eroded away. There's a particular kind of sadness in reading about the final months of the Me-262 program. The reports from early 1945 paint a picture of desperate improvisation. Jets parked on autobahns because airfields are too damaged to use. Pilots taking off from road segments with trees cut down to clear approach paths. Mechanics cannibalizing 3 broken aircraft to create 1 functional one. Operations officers sending inexperienced pilots into combat with single-digit hours of jet experience because there's no one else left. The expertise that had been carefully built up over months, the hard-won knowledge of how to fly jets effectively, how to maintain them, how to employ them tactically, was evaporating. Experienced pilots were shot down or transferred. Skilled mechanics were conscripted into infantry units. The institutional knowledge that made the Me-262 effective was disappearing faster than new knowledge could be created. By April 1945, some Me-262 units were down to just 2 or 3 operational aircraft. They'd fly 1 mission per day, sometimes less. Not because the pilots lacked courage or determination, but because there wasn't fuel for more, wasn't ammunition, wasn't replacement parts. And then it ended. Germany surrendered. The Me-262s that were still flyable were captured, photographed, studied. Some were shipped to America and Britain for detailed analysis. Others were simply destroyed, blown up or bulldozed to prevent any future use. The German pilots went home, or to prisoner of war camps, or they just disappeared into the chaos of post-war Europe. Many of them never flew again. Some became engineers, using their experience to help design the next generation of jets, this time for the Americans, or British, or French. Others left aviation entirely, wanted nothing more to do with the technology that had defined and nearly destroyed their lives. A few wrote memoirs, documented their experiences. These accounts are valuable historical sources. They describe what it was like to fly the world's first operational jet fighter, the exhilaration of that first takeoff, the terror of engine failures at 30,000 feet, the guilt of surviving when so many friends didn't, the strange pride in flying something so advanced, even while knowing it was futile. One pilot wrote, "We had the best aircraft in the world. We knew it. The Allies knew it. But it didn't matter. You can't win a war with just good aircraft. You need fuel and pilots and time and luck. We ran out of all of them." Another wrote, "Every flight felt like a gift. Not from God, I'd stopped believing in God by then, but from physics, from the engineers who built something so advanced it seemed impossible. I knew we were losing the war, knew Germany was finished. But when I was in the cockpit of an Me-262, for a few minutes at least, I could pretend we were winning, pretend we had a chance." The lie was comforting. These reflections capture something important. The Me-262 wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol, a promise, a last gasp of German technological superiority. The engineers who designed it, the pilots who flew it, the mechanics who maintained it, they all understood they were working with something special, something that transcended the immediate tactical situation. They were building the future, even as their present collapsed around them. So what do we make of all this? What lessons can we extract from the story of Albert Wall and the Me-262? What does this 15-minute encounter over Munich in 1944 teach us about technology, warfare, history, human nature? First, technology alone doesn't determine outcomes. The Me-262 was objectively superior to any Allied aircraft. But Germany still lost. Lost because wars are won by logistics and strategy and industrial capacity and trained personnel and morale and 1,000 other factors that matter more than any single weapon. The best tank in the world doesn't help if you can't fuel it. The best aircraft in the world doesn't matter if you can't produce enough of them. Second, timing is everything. The Me-262 arrived too late. 2 years earlier, it might have changed the course of the war, made Allied bombing campaigns untenable, forced different strategies. But by 1944, the window had closed. The opportunity had passed. Revolutionary technology arriving at the wrong moment is just expensive failure. Third, human factors matter more than technical specifications. The Me-262's speed and firepower were impressive on paper. But in practice, its effectiveness depended on pilot skill, mechanical reliability, logistical support, tactical doctrine. And Germany in 1944 was running short of all of these. The best aircraft in the world still needed human beings to fly it, maintain it, support it. When those human systems failed, the technology failed too. Fourth, war is ultimately about people, not machines. We can talk about airspeed and cannon calibers and fuel consumption rates. But the real story is about human beings. Albert Wall pushing his Mosquito to its limits, the German pilot chasing him, hoping for a kill, Loban scrambling to open the emergency hatch, ground crews maintaining aircraft under impossible conditions, intelligence officers trying to make sense of fragmentary reports, families back home wondering if their loved ones will return. The Me-262 is fascinating because it represents a turning point in technology. But it's meaningful because of what it tells us about people, about how humans adapt to new weapons, how they cope with being outmatched, how they survive against impossible odds, how they keep fighting even when they know they're going to lose. Albert Wall kept flying missions after his encounter, didn't request a transfer, didn't claim psychological trauma, just got back in the Mosquito and flew the next day, and the day after that, until the war ended. That's not heroism in the Hollywood sense. That's just the grinding, exhausting reality of warfare. You survive one day, then you have to survive the next day, and the day after, until it's over or you're dead. In the decades after the war, the Me-262 became legendary. Aviation historians wrote books about it. Museums collected examples. Documentary filmmakers shot footage of restored aircraft. The Me-262 that arrived too late to save Germany became, in peacetime, a symbol of innovation and missed opportunities. Some of these restored aircraft still fly today, at air shows, for documentary filming, carefully maintained by enthusiasts who spend thousands of hours preserving these mechanical artifacts. When a Me-262 takes off, the distinctive scream of those Jumo 004 engines, the way it accelerates down the runway, the steep climb angle, audiences watch in awe. But the audiences aren't thinking about warfare. They're not imagining the terror Allied bomber crews felt when they saw that silhouette approaching. They're not contemplating the desperate futility of flying the world's best fighter aircraft for a losing cause. They're just appreciating the engineering, the beauty of a machine that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. That's how history works, ultimately. The sharp edges wear smooth. The fear and pain and death fade into abstraction. What remains is the story, the narrative, the lesson. And the lesson of the Me 262 is complex enough that people are still arguing about it 80 years later. Was it a waste of resources? Should Germany have focused on producing more conventional fighters instead of experimental jets? Or was it the only option that might have changed the outcome? These questions generate endless debate among historians. Entire academic careers have been built on analysing the Me 262 program. But for Albert Wall, lying in his bed in 1994, these debates were probably irrelevant. He wasn't a historian, he was a survivor, a man who faced the future 50 years earlier and lived to see what that future became. A man who knew, in a visceral way that academics never could, what it meant to be outmatched by technology. Did he have regrets? Probably not about the war. He did his duty, flew his missions, contributed to the Allied victory, came home alive. What more could anyone ask? But maybe he had thoughts, reflections, questions he never voiced publicly. What if the German pilot had been better trained? What if the Me 262's cannons had been more accurate? What if Wall had been flying 10 seconds slower? What if the clouds had been higher? What if luck had broken the other way? These are the questions that survivors think about, the margins that separated life from death, the randomness of it all, the arbitrary nature of survival. Wall lived, thousands of other pilots didn't. Was he more skilled or just more lucky? Probably both. Probably neither. Probably survival came down to so many small factors that trying to identify any single reason is pointless. But he lived. That's what matters. He got to go home, got to see his family, got to grow old, got to watch the world change in ways that would have seemed impossible in 1944. See the technology that nearly killed him become routine. Ordinary. Safe. And maybe, in those final years when he was old and the war was just a memory, maybe he thought about the German pilot, the enemy who became a historical footnote, the man whose name he never knew, the adversary who in different circumstances might have been an ally, or a friend, or just another old man telling stories about flying the most advanced aircraft of his time. We'll never know. Wall took those thoughts with him. Like all survivors, he kept some things private. Some memories are too personal to share, too complex to explain, too large to fit into words. July 26th, 1944. 29,000 feet above Munich. 15 minutes that changed one pilot's understanding of the possible. 15 minutes when the future arrived early. 15 minutes when speed and altitude and technological advantage weren't enough. Albert Wall pushed his Mosquito to the edge of its capabilities and discovered something fundamental about warfare. About technology. About human vulnerability in the face of progress. He discovered that the rules can change in an instant, that the advantages you counted on can evaporate, that survival sometimes depends on factors beyond your control. He flew into that encounter as a confident reconnaissance pilot, flying the fastest aircraft the Allies had. Untouchable, invulnerable. He flew out as something else, a man who understood in ways that can't be taught or explained, that the future is always approaching faster than you think. The Me-262 that chased him was just the beginning. Proof that aircraft could fly at speeds that seemed impossible. That warfare could evolve in unexpected directions. That the generation of weapons and tactics and strategies that won World War II would be obsolete within a decade. Today, jets routinely fly at twice the speed of sound. Hypersonic missiles travel at Mach 5. Drones conduct surveillance and strikes from continents away. The technology that seemed revolutionary in 1944 is now museum-piece historical curiosity. The pace of change has only accelerated, but some things remain constant. The human element, the pilot's decision-making under stress, the split-second choices that determine survival, the courage required to climb into an aircraft and fly into danger. These things haven't changed, can't change. Because underneath all the technology, warfare is still about human beings making impossible decisions under terrible conditions. Albert Wall understood this, lived it, survived it. And in surviving, he became part of a larger story. The story of how warfare evolved, how technology advanced, how the jet age began. Not in some sterile test facility or academic paper, but in combat. Over Bavaria. With two pilots, one British, one German, testing the limits of physics and luck and skill. The British pilot lived. We know his name, know his story, can trace his life from that day in 1944 until his death 50 years later. The German pilot remains anonymous, lost to incomplete records and the chaos of war's end. But both men flew into history that day. Both men participated in a moment that would define aerial combat for generations to come. And when Albert Wall took his final breath in 1994, when his heart stopped and his consciousness faded, maybe his last thought was of flying, of clear air and thin oxygen and the sound of Merlin engines, of Bavaria spreading out below like a topographic map, of the moment when he glanced to the side and saw something impossible, something beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The future, screaming past at 500 miles per hour, leaving him behind but alive, and that, ultimately, was enough.